Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest introduced to you now. Cary L. Kelly is a self described standard American diet, aka SAD diet survivor, a cookbook author, butcher, former chef, community school dropout, marathoner, gym enthusiast, chronic inflammation ditcher, and nutrition research hobbyist. I love that. He discovered low carbohydrate diets almost 7 years ago to his great benefit. He is the recent author of Carnicopia, the meat based cookbook your doctor doesn't want you to read, which helps readers unleash the transformative power of a carnivore diet. Carnicopia is much more than a cookbook, however. It's a manifesto for wellness. It's perfect for anyone who is looking to lose weight, increase energy, and radically improve their health while discovering the life changing power of a meat based diet. According to one of the many 5-star reviews, quote, I especially like how meat expert Cary Kelly explains how to handle the different cuts in ways that I have heard about but have not yet tried. Dry brining, reverse searing, and all kinds of things I've been curious about. He adds many helpful tips about how to handle the recipes efficiently to flatten the learning curve. End quote. You can find Cary primarily on Twitter at Cary Kelly 11. Cary Kelly, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks, Casey. I appreciate you inviting me here. I'm a big fan of your show, and I listen regularly.
Well, thank you so very much for the kind words. I really, really appreciate that. I followed you on Twitter for a very long time. I was not aware that you were coming out with a cookbook. And what a great title, man. Carnicopia, the meat-based cookbook your doctor doesn't want you to read. I love that line. What do you mean when you say this is the cookbook that your doctor doesn't want you to read?
Basically, I'm telling you to eat all of the things that your doctor tells you that you shouldn't. Um, the 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 idea that saturated fat and foods rich in cholesterol are going to kill you are greatly exaggerated, and that's what I intend to show by having you try these recipes out.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. I think it also depends on who your doctor is. Of course, in our space, we have people like Dr. Tro, Dr. Brian Lenskis, Dr. Philip Ovadia, and if you're lucky enough to have one of them as your doctor, I think they'd be on board. But you're right, the conventional kind of wisdom out there with most doctors, we have a long, long ways to go, don't we?
That's fair. I could have possibly put most doctors in my subtitle, and that would have been more accurate. There are some great doctors out there who understand after doing, what the book told them to do for years and realizing that it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Those doctors get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're very fortunate to have those doctors as resources in our world. And it's always been my argument that, yes, they did not get a lot of nutrition education when they were in school, which is probably, in my opinion, a better thing because if they had, they probably would have gotten more of the bad advice, the wrong advice. They just would have been more ingrained, so to speak, in that kind of like nutrition paradigm. So it's fortunate that we have some of these doctors that go through their own suffering, gain lots of weight, try to tell people, what to do to improve their health and get off of medications. They have to go through their own journey as well to be able to do that. So yeah, very fortunate that they're not getting more education to again not like further entrench them in that type of a system.
Yeah, a doctor DM'd me who wished to remain anonymous because he's still stuck with the standard of care and all of that. And he told me, he said that it took him seven years to learn the standard of care, and it took him another 7 years to realize that it didn't work for healing people.
Wow. Wow. That must be a really terrible spot to be in, man. All these doctors seem to have really good intentions and get into the field of medicine to try to help people. And by and large, just end up kind of getting stuck in that kind of a system. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. But again, we're very fortunate that we do have lots of people that are kind of waking up to that. And I think your story is also very unique. How you found all of this. This could have very easily gone a different way for you, but you were open-minded enough to kind of consider this. So can you tell us about your health kind of growing up and why eventually this kind of space where we find low carbohydrate diets kind of came into your consciousness?
Well, I grew up a thin child. I was basically able to eat anything that I wanted to eat. My mother bought into the low cholesterol, low fat thing. We had margarine in the house, tons of low fat dinners, red meat once a week at the most, and, chicken, that sort of thing, lean meatloaf most of the time. And I honestly think that I could have been a lot taller than I was had I been given more protein growing up as a child. anyway, I had tons of sugar. I never gained an ounce of weight, even when I tried. I could just pretty much eat whatever I wanted. And that continued until almost, into my 30s and almost 40 years old. I was 155 pounds my entire adult life up until that point. And I bought into, all of the common sayings, a balanced diet, the food pyramid, all that nonsense. But I also ate terribly. I ate ice cream and chips for dinner, and I still didn't gain weight. So when I would look at fat people or obese people, I would think these people just lack discipline, just like all the healthy people or all the apparently healthy people will tell you. They just don't understand that, your body reaches a certain point where it says, okay, I've had enough. And it just starts packing all that energy that's in your blood, glucose, and storing it as fat. And then, it's over from there unless you correct your eating behavior. Most people just don't get that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, when I reached age 40, um, I had a terrible back pain, and I went to the doctor, the emergency room, and they told me that I had osteoarthritis after some X-rays and such, and that I was just going to have to get used to, the pain, dealing with physical therapy, and trying to manage, my symptoms, basically, like the system is so famous for now. And I believed him, so I ate ibuprofen, 5 or 6 a day every day. I worked for 7 or 8 years to manage the pain, and nobody once ever told me, to try and eat healthier, to try and stay away from inflammatory foods, much less tell you what those inflammatory foods are. And my health just continued to deteriorate. I would gain 6 pounds a year until 2018, which was about 8 years after my osteoarthritis diagnosis. And then I just reached rock bottom. I had no energy. I couldn't work more than 3 or 4 hours on my feet without just, aching to the bone from my feet through my knees up through my hips. I was just a miserable, pessimistic person. And it all came to a head one day when I was walking up a hill on a hot summer day, and I was just sweating profusely. And about a half a mile from my house, my right arm went numb, and I started, I was wondering, am I having a stroke or a heart attack here? And it really scared me. And fortunately, I made it home, and I just had a little talk with myself, and I said, you're going to have to do something, or you're not going to make it to the age of 50. I was 48 at the time, and honestly, I didn't really care if I made it to 50 because I just felt so miserable all the time with the inflammation in my body. It was just dominating my life, and I was like, all right, well, let's try something. And I tried. I decided to try a week of low carb, and after 3 days, I just felt like an enormous weight was lifted off of my shoulders, and I haven't looked back since then.
Wow, that's incredible. Why low carb? Like, why was that the thing you decided to try? There's so many other options out there that would seem to me to be a little bit more intuitive.
Well, it kind of was dumped into my lap. Maybe not dumped, but shown to me. I feel like, you know, karma or God or just whatever was looking out for me, because I met a guy who was working in the restaurant I was working. He was visiting from another store. He was from Virginia Beach. His name was Todd. And Todd was there to show us, some things to try and help, improve business, because business wasn't running that well. And he just, out of the blue, we were talking, and one day he just says, I lost 60 pounds on low carb. I eat butter and mayonnaise, and I'm just a different person now. And it was just kind of out of the blue. And at the time I was like, okay, whatever, what does that have to do with me? Why are you telling me this? And I just kind of filed it away. And for some reason, after my arm went numb, and I knew that I had to change something, or I was, going to kill myself with what I was doing, that that popped into my head, and I said, "Why not?"
Wow. It's crazy to think back on the little like signposts that we get to finally end up here. Like the first personal trainers I ever met that said like fat is fuel and fat is not bad for you and eat fat, get fit kind of thing. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like you would eat
Right.
fat, get fit. That makes no sense. And I think back on like what if somebody had never sent me a video or I'm sorry, a radio interview that Nina Teicholz gave on a radio station here locally in Salt Lake City. Like just little hints along the way that, like you said, get filed away in long-term memory somewhere, and like eventually we start to give them some credence because our suffering is increasing in some way.
Right. They're little seeds, is what they are, and they're just waiting for the right opportunity to bloom into something. Um, I often get people telling me, I shouldn't argue with this person or that person who's just being argumentative, and they're saying all the things that mainstream says about the way we eat, and that I'm wasting my time. And I'm like, maybe I'm not. Maybe this person just isn't ready for to put all these things together. But I can plant these seeds so that maybe one day he hits rock bottom and he remembers this conversation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good encouragement for me to keep showing my shopping cart off at Costco as a carnivore cart to the people that don't seem to care. I do it every time and think it's not making any progress. So that's encouraging.
It's like the time when Todd just started telling me out of the blue without even asking about keto and what it was doing for him. Um, when you change your life and you feel great, you just want to share it. You want everybody around you to know. You want the whole world to know. And sometimes you just feel like, I'm in this alone. So expressing it and telling people validates it.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good point. Okay, so when you started the low carbohydrate diet, was your intention basically like, well, you've added a few pounds, you're going to do this diet, you're going to lose weight, and the weight loss is going to help you feel a little bit better? Or did you understand at all in the beginning that low carbohydrate might actually be, like you described, kind of a lower inflammatory diet, and that itself might help you with the pain?
Right. Like so many people believe or believe they're going to use keto or low carb for. I was trying to lose weight. I believed that if I lost weight, I would feel better, and then I would go from there. Little did I know was little did I know was that all the inflammation, not all the inflammation, 95% of the inflammation that was with me daily for almost a decade just was gone after 3 days. And that just blew me away. I hadn't even lost a pound at that point, and I was all in at that point. I was committed. The week had turned into indefinitely, and that the inflammation was, like I said, was just ruling my life. And the analogy I like to use is it felt like it had rained inside my body every single day for a decade nonstop, and then all of a sudden the rain stopped, the clouds parted, and the sun came out, and the birds started singing, and the world was completely different for me.
Oh my goodness. I love that. I can't hear a version of that story enough times to hear Brett Lloyd describe like all the dark depression that he had that finally cleared up, and Dr. Ian Campbell in Ireland describing the first day, looked out the window and everything was just bright and beautiful. It's pretty cool to hear that story. What kind of resources were you using in the beginning to kind of help you along? Do you recall, like, was there a book or a podcast or anything that was helping you understand what you needed to do at the time?
Well, that night I had my little mini stroke or whatever it was. I looked up keto. I just looked up keto on the internet, and I stumbled upon a website called ruledme.com, and
Yeah.
they have a great low carb guide, and they also have a carnivore guide now, and they go over what it is, what you need to do, what to expect, what foods to eat, and all the little caveats about this is associated with heart disease and yada yada yada, etc. Just to cover their butts. But it is it is an amazing, comprehensive resource, and I was fortunate to stumble upon that because I started having questions, immediately, why do I feel lightheaded? I looked up, oh, you probably need more sodium, or, to look at your electrolytes because you're urinating more, um, and things like that. That was really a godsend for me, and I still recommend that resource to people when they ask me.
That's fantastic. And that was back, did you say 2018?
2018.
Dude, that's when I found it. That's so funny. I haven't thought about that website in forever, but when I started to learn about, ketogenic diets, it was really about May of 2018, and that was one of the one websites that I remember now. I would go to it all the time. Even their illustrations were very informative, and like you got to, oh, this is what ketones are. Oh, this is the keto flu. Oh, this is why sodium's so important. Like I remember really good explanations. What a great resource.
Yes, it is, and I'm grateful to have found that. It saved me a lot of searching. I'll tell you that for sure.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to link that in the show notes so anybody can go visit. I'm going to spend some time on there this afternoon at some point because I haven't been on there in forever. So, yeah, that's great. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so that was a really good resource. How was your progression? Like, did you notice any negative side effects of the adjustment period? It sounds like very, very quickly you're already feeling better and were fully committed regardless of what happened. But do you remember any like adaptation issues that you had, digestion, anything go off?
Um, I know a lot of people say that they've had constipation or even diarrhea issues, but I never seem to have those problems. The only thing that comes remotely close to keto flu for me was I experienced some lightheadedness. It wasn't even a bad feeling. It felt like I don't know, like the beginning of a buzz, like I was drinking alcohol or something, and it was just a very light feeling in my head. And I ate some sodium, I ate some salt, and it immediately went away. And that was my keto flu.
Not bad. Not too bad at all. A little salt, cure that. That's great.
Um, the smelly ketone urine, I had that. It didn't even smell bad. It just smelled very different and a little strong.
Yeah.
I would say, but that after a while, our body figures out how not to waste so many ketones.
Well said. Yeah, well said. That's why the pea strips, when somebody's first starting a ketogenic diet, work great. You can use those and they'll show you you're at a certain level of ketosis. But inevitably, if you continue after about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you're not really getting it's showing you that you're not really in ketosis any longer. But the way I explain it to people is exactly what you said in the beginning. You're producing all of these ketones that the body doesn't know what to do with, but over time the body readjusts and understands that it needs to make the right amount of ketones, and it's using them, not wasting them. And so that's why the urine might smell a little bit different in the beginning. Your breath might be a little bit different, but over time that tends to go away because your body's being more resourceful with the new fuel source that it's adapting to.
Right. Um, Funny story with those little pea strips. I went to the supplement store and tried to find some to measure my ketones. It's not necessary. You can actually smell them. You can feel them. You don't need to test them. But I was curious and I wanted to see anyway. And every one of those strips that I peed on, no matter what, any time of day, it was always purple, dark purple, which is near the far end of the spectrum and dangerous and ketoacidosis, yada yada yada. And I was like, oh my god, do I have ketoacidosis? And after a little research, I found that a lot of times these strips are sit on the shelf for years or longer, and they're not that accurate at that point. They're pretty much garbage.
Wow,
They'll
I'd
just
never
tell you,
considered that.
they'll just tell you that the ketones are present. The amount may not be very accurate after they've sat around for years.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think people, when they're starting out again, they can consider whether they want to use them or not. Like you said, you don't need them. You'll get the feel of it. There's a certain mouth feel you get as ketones are coming out of the mouth. Your mouth will feel different. But yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. Can you describe how your diet changed over time? What was working initially seems to work really well for most people until a certain point when, again, things that you wouldn't have started with seem like things you need to dial in as time goes on to continue to see benefits.
Well, in the beginning, I was a green vegetable and protein guy. I would have a steak with broccoli, a steak with asparagus, a steak with cauliflower, ground beef with some veggie. I had that mentality where I had to have a protein and a veggie for every meal. Just that's because that's how I lived my entire life. And after a while, I got really bored with vegetables. They just didn't appeal to me. The broccoli, the cauliflower, and spinach and those things. I just got really bored with them, and I naturally just gravitated away from that, needing a vegetable with every meal to rarely having vegetables. And now I'm to the point where I might eat 3 or 4 different vegetables, period, onions, cauliflower, cabbage, and then a few fruits, peppers, olives, a few berries, and that's pretty much it, because that's what appeals to me. I no longer make myself eat things that I don't like or that I'm not that interested in. I feel like that's not what diet is about. We can eat the things that we enjoy as long as they're whole foods and still be healthy. I mean, of course we love the taste of a brownie, but the difference between what's good for me, what's a whole food, and what appeals to my taste buds, or my vagus nerve, my brain, and that sort of thing. So I
Wow.
just naturally gravitated away from vegetables.
Wow. Well, it sounds like it was very intuitive. Had you heard of the carnivore diet or known anybody who was doing a full carnivore diet where they were fully eliminating most, if not all, plant foods?
I hadn't heard about it until I got on Twitter, within 5 or 6 months. This is around 2019. Michaela Peterson and Sean Baker. That was my introduction to carnivore. Um, I've never tried to do carnivore. I have done carnivore month. I've gone periods where I would just eat the BBBE, bacon, butter, beef, and eggs. Just to see what it would do for me. But like I said, I always just feel better with a few of those fruits and vegetables in my diet. It just, I don't know, just makes my food seem more interesting, more appealing, more easily more easily sustainable, I guess would
Yeah.
be the best way to say it for
I
me.
wish more I wish more people would know that. I've always thought of carnivore as hyper carnivore in nature is an animal that eats at least 70 to 75% of their calories from animal products. Within that 75%, that is the majority. That's mostly what you eat. But that doesn't mean that having a small amount of plant foods that you know are safe, that allow you to stick with the diet, that make things interesting, like that's fine. Nobody's going to get too worked up if you cook half an onion and throw it with some burger patties or whatever. Like I want more people to understand that this diet can be very enjoyable. You can add things in for variety. I don't think it's the best to eat tons and tons of plants anymore, but like have some. If you know they affect you reasonably well and don't have any negative side effects, and again keep things interesting for you, then you should go for it. Like that's fine.
Right. I believe everybody's different, a little bit different, as long as we start with a core of meat, healthy meats, healthy fats. You can try, your fruits and vegetables, and see what works best for you. No, everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Tell us about your journey with red meat. Obviously, with like your background and the way you were raised, very similar to the way I was raised. Was like red meat was there, but you inherently knew that it wasn't the best for you. Was that something that kind of took you a little while to kind of wrap your head around, or were you already including a lot of red meat in your diet to begin with?
I didn't eat a lot of red meat until I started doing keto. At that point, I didn't care. I ate red meat 5, 6, 8 times a week, and I was feeling great. I didn't care if it was bad for me. If I died tomorrow, I was going to die with a smile on my face and not miserable. So it took. I got into Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise, and Jason Fung's The Obesity Code, and I had some concerns. Of course, everybody does in the back of their mind. You hear it your whole life that those things are bad for you. So I did some research, and those books were the first two that I stumbled upon, and they made me look at science and everything that I had been told and taught about nutrition completely different. It was pretty much like everything that I knew was wrong. And at that point, I got angry. I've been lied to my whole life, and I wasted all these years being miserable and sick and fat, and there's nobody to take it out on. At least I didn't think there was. Um, the more I got into this, and when I started getting into social media and realizing that I can help people, that I figured out that was how I got back at those people that told me all those lies and made me sick, to help other people escape that same system.
Yeah, man, I don't think you can name two better books, especially at the time that were available. Nina Teichel's, if you can read The Big Fat Surprise and not get angry reading it, you're a better man than I am, because I got very angry reading that book for the first time.
Right.
And yeah, The Obesity Code by Jason Fung was like a complete paradigm shifter, where I had been telling people to eat frequent meals, lots of snacks, lots of whole grains. I myself couldn't go more than 2 or 3 hours without, snacks between clients. And to hear him describe what actually happens to the body, not when it's calorically deprived, but when it's in a state of fasting, was absolutely just mind bending. There's no place in any nutrition manual I've ever come across and read and got certified in that says anything about fasting. It is ridiculous. And you read through some of this stuff, and it's like they are describing entire metabolic pathways that need to be understood by nutritionists, and nobody understands it unless you find some of these books that are just incredible.
Right. Um, I owe I owe the writing of my recipe book. Nina Teicholz deserves some credit because she encouraged me. She followed me on Twitter and always commented a lot on my posts about how I should put together a cookbook because she believed it could help people, and it was her encouragement that initially got me started on that idea. So like I said, I owe her some credit for that. And when I approached the obesity code with Jason Fung, one of my biggest questions was, why am I always hungry, but I'm fat? How is that possible? How am I starved for food and I have all this fat on me? And why can't I burn it? And Jason Fung, with his great analogies, put it all together for me. And I was already doing it, but I didn't understand how it was being done until I read Jason Fung.
Well, at the time that this drops, we'll be very close to the COSI conference in Las Vegas, which I'll be going to, and Nina will be there as well. So I'll be sure to give her a giant hug from you for being there. She's an absolute angel, just one of my favorite people in the world. And yeah, you mentioned the analogies from the obesity code. Jason Fung is absolutely just the best at breaking things down, explaining things in a way that's like a bit snarky, but also gives those great analogies like you mentioned. And like, why would the body be so stupid that it can't burn fat when it has body fat to burn, and yet you're always hungry? Like, he explains it so well to the point that like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Right. He's got the locked refrigerator analogy, and with insulin being the key
Yep.
to it all.
Yep, I love that. Yeah, good way to say that. Okay, you mentioned your book, so this would be a good segue. Let's talk about your culinary kind of background. As we kind of mentioned in the introduction, you had been a butcher, you had been in the industry, the restaurant industry. I assume cooking yourself. Like, tell us your involvement with food itself and how understanding how to prepare food and cook food kind of went along with this low carbohydrate and carnivore adjacent kind of diet.
Okay, well, I just kind of stumbled into the restaurant industry in my early 20s. I got a part-time job at a restaurant, and a month later, I was the kitchen manager of the place because I was a highly motivated individual who picked up things very quickly. And from there, it was just one restaurant gig after another for 18 years, everything from dishwasher to chef. So I I had a lot of experience with different types of foods, which was a great background for being able to write a cookbook. I understand basic concepts for desserts and sauces and cooking in the oven and sauteing and all that stuff. So naturally, it was easy for me to, not easy, but it was easier for me to be able to look at popular recipes and trying to turn them into something low carb, keto, or carnivore. That background helped greatly.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
And one thing that I did not that I despised about restaurants is once I learned what was good for me and what was inflammatory and then bad, I really didn't like what I was doing anymore because 90% of the stuff I was putting out on plates, was full of seed oils and emulsifiers and salt, tons of salt and tons of sugar, and it was just a recipe for making people unhealthy. I was very relieved to get out of that industry and become a butcher.
Mm. Well said. Now, if I go back to before you discovered low carb, I know what it was like for me, and I would have told you, to see if you can relate to this, I would have told you that I love cooking. I love making new recipes. I love going to the store, finding new ingredients, and I would spend a lot of time. I'd stop at the store probably 5 or 6 times a week, combine a lot of things, spend a lot of time in the kitchen, use lots of different gadgets. And I would tell you that I would love that, but it took such a big chunk of my time and energy where, once I got into low carb and eventually carnivore diets, everything just kind of simplified. I realized like I appreciate the cooking part, but I will want that to be minimalist. I use that time now to go do other things. Like I go on walks and, I enjoy time with my wife. And like there's so many other things that you can do. Did you have a similar experience with your own preparing a food, cooking a food as you were changing your diet?
Absolutely. Well, for one, I can go to the grocery store and get everything I need for a week in less time than it takes to rob a bank. Um, that's big. It used to take me, half hour, 45 minutes, and I got all the shopping cart full of stuff and get home and I'm like, where's the food? It's all junk. Now it's just like this compressed little package I can put in 2 grocery bags and that's it. That's huge all by itself. And then the time that you save not having to dice and chop and boil and blanch and bake all your vegetables, that's a big time saver too. And then you have to dirty up half your bowls and utensils to make one vegetable dish. Whereas if you want a steak and some eggs, you can use one pan, one spatula, one fork, one plate, and you're good.
Yeah, well said. And not to say anything about all the food you're going to throw away at the end of the week anyway. Like I take my recycling can out once a week to get picked up, and my garbage goes out once every 3 or 4 weeks. Like it just never fills up because you're not throwing food away.
I've done a post on X about this. I take out one. I'm not sure how big they are. One kitchen-sized garbage bag of trash a week, and the people I live with are standard American diet. They eat the typical fare, and they'll average 2.5 bags each for
Wow.
them. So it's what is that one? Like 25% of the trash that they're putting out.
Wow. Yeah. Not to mention the parts of the vegetables you're not going to use or they go bad over time. I've never seen anybody go through like those big bags of kale at Costco without throwing half the bag away at the end of the week when it's all, wilted and doesn't taste good anymore. That's such a good point. So as you are, kind of looking at the way you're managing your diet, obviously you've got the background, you've got the experience. This comes fairly natural to you. When did you decide that you thought you might want to take on a project of writing a cookbook?
Well, I had been sharing my food on X for quite a long time, and many different people, including Nina, kept telling me I should put together a cookbook, and so I finally did. Lindy Louise was actually the one who got the ball rolling because she sent me a link to a place where I could put um, a book writing place. I'm not sure what I would call that. But anyway, she was working on something and she sent me that link and I was like, I just started doing it. And next thing you know, I had 4 or 5 recipes and it just took off from there.
Wow. Is that Limitless Lindy, by the way? Is that what she goes by?
She goes by Lindy Louise, Dr. Lindy Louise.
Okay.
Are you
Gotcha.
familiar with her?
We have a Lindy scheduled to appear on the podcast, but it's not for several months that she's going to be on. So I'm not sure if it's which one or the other. I can't remember off the top of my head. We scheduled a few weeks ago, but yeah,
I'll
one
have
of the
to
Lindys.
send you her profile
Cool.
because she's a really great person. I think she would be great on your show if you don't know.
Yeah, that sounds great. I would love to. Awesome. At the time when you were considering this, so when was this chronologically? What year were you getting a little bit more serious about making a cookbook?
Um, let's see. 2020, around 2022, I would say I started logging my recipes in WordPress, just so because people would kept asking me, "Hey, what's your recipe for this? What's your recipe for that?" I'd seen it before, or somebody told me. I built I didn't build the website. I signed up for a website where I could log my recipes. So that started in 2022, and then last March of last year, I started putting this recipe book together, and sometime around in the fall. No, it took me a year. So the March before last, not last year, but the year before that, I started putting together in a recipe book, and then I had someone help me, Sarah Holy. She brought my vision to life. I had a very high school primitive looking book on this website that I designed, and she just made it pop with the photos and the format. She's got background in this kind of thing, so I owe her a lot of credit for this too.
Wow. Well, the cover looks great. I've not yet gotten the book. I'm planning on it. It looks really good. The cover looks great. Okay, 2022, 2023. There may have been a few carnivore kind of cookbooks. Obviously, Courtney Luna put one out last year that was not available back then. She had been sharing a bunch of recipes. Maria Emmerich's could have been available at that time. Did you know of any other like carnivore style kind of cookbooks that were out there?
Saladino had one. Paul
Okay.
Saladino had one, I believe, and I'm not sure if Dr. Baker had one. I know he had the carnivore book, but I don't know if he had anything related to recipes. So
Gotcha. I learned this from Dr. Ben Bickman. Apparently, if you make a health book first, which you're supposed to do, like Why We Get Sick was his book, you're supposed to follow it up like a year or two later with a recipe book that's a little bit more practical. So that would make sense that those guys would, write the carnivore code or the carnivore diet like Sean Baker did, and then follow that up with some kind of a practical kind of recipe guide of some kind.
right, because everybody's going to be like, okay, what next? And they need a plan.
Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good point. Tell us, what things did you want to do in your cookbook that you weren't seeing in some of these other resources? What did you want to kind of set yourself apart?
I wasn't really comparing myself to other cookbook writers and recipe. I feel like my biggest strength is taking basic common ingredients and using simple recipes that anybody can do, and turning it into something delicious. I get put off by a lot of recipes out there that have weird ingredients or require a weird pan, a spring form pan or whatever, things that most people don't have. I wanted people to be able to just go in their kitchen and read my recipe and be able to make it, and maybe go to the store for one ingredient. And I think the simplification is what makes me um, different than most recipe books.
Mm. What are some surprising examples of that? Like I'm thinking of the things that I cook, and yeah, like I wouldn't have thought that two or three ingredients would have made something that would be like absolutely delicious. What are some examples in your cookbook of recipes that really just take some basic things, a few ingredients, combining them together, cooking them in a certain way? Like, what are some of your favorites as far as that goes?
Well, if you take 2 cups of beef broth and combine it with 1 cup of heavy cream and reduce it for 20 minutes, it turns into an amazing gravy. That's it, just 2 ingredients. The picture of my gravy recipes on the cover of the book, you can see it, and that surprises me every time that that's just 2 ingredients. I can't think of anything that is that simple, but most that's probably the easiest one I can think of. I have a dessert, a cheesecake dessert that's just heavy cream, uh, mascarpone, with a little bit of stevia and vanilla, and you just whip that with a blender, and it just turns into this amazing cheesecake-like tasting fluff. Um,
Wow. Yeah, sounds really good. What about for things like simple kind of day-to-day cuts, like say a chuck roast or even things like ground beef? Have you found that those can be very versatile and have lots of different recipes you can make with just those simple things as well?
they're mainstays: chuck roast and ground beef. With ground beef, there's dozens of different things that you can do with that. If you're not afraid of a little bit of tomatoes, you can add tomatoes and some spices and some broth, and you have chili. Or you can omit the broth and add some more spices and cumin, and you have tacos, a taco bowl. You can add tomato and a little bit of stevia sweetened ketchup, and have sloppy joes. It just little tiny tweaks, to ground beef, and you can do so many different things. One of my favorite things to make is just ground beef with eggs over easy, or eggs sunny side up with bacon and some cheddar cheese. You just pile that on. It's $6, $7, $8 at the most, and you feel nice and light but not stuffed after you eat that, and you're good to go for 10, 12 hours.
That sounds
Um,
delicious.
Chuck roast, I wouldn't say it's versatile, but it's definitely dependable and affordable. You can cook a lot of it at one time, and the leftovers are great. You just throw it in a crock pot or an instant pot with some broth, and turn it on and let it go until it falls apart. It's hard to go wrong with that.
That's been a go-to for me this winter is just a chuck roast or two in a slow cooker, a little bit of broth. We make our broth with the remains of a rotisserie chicken. I don't get too caught up in like organic, non-organic. If I'm in a pinch and I need a meal, a rotisserie chicken's a really good go-to. And yeah, you just cook that up in the Instant Pot. Now you drain it off. You've got some really nice, delicious, rich broth. And oh my goodness, in the slow cooker with a chuck roast with a little bit of spices, it smells up the house for a good 12, 24 hours. It smells
Right.
amazing. And like, what a warming kind of type of a meal, and so versatile. You shred it right up. It can go in any number of different recipes. Like you said, like tacos is such an easy one. There's so many different things you can do with it.
Yeah. I just made a really, I don't know if you have an Instant Pot, but I just made a really good chicken soup. You just throw some chicken with some broth and some spices in the pot, and 55 minutes later, you have this amazing tasting chicken soup.
Oh, that sounds great. I'll be making that. That sounds really good.
It's really easy.
That sounds great. And yeah, I imagine like most kind of carnivore cookbooks out there that the red meat is probably a bit more of the star. But do you feature? You mentioned the chicken soup. You must feature other recipes that feature chicken, pork, eggs, seafood, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Meat, eggs, dairy, seafood, MEDS, meds. That's what I'm into. Um, 85, 90% beef is my thing. I don't try to do that. It's just what I end up eating because that's what I feel my best. That's what I crave. That's what I want. Chicken once or twice a month. I don't feel my best on chicken, but sometimes I feel like chicken. Um, the problem I get with chicken is it's not very filling. It the satiety doesn't last very long. I feel like a couple hours after I eat, some chicken legs or chicken wings, I'm hungry again, or I could eat. That's the problem with chicken I see. Of course, people talk about the omega-6, omega-3 imbalance and all of that. Um, I try not to get too much into that because I really don't eat a lot of pork or chicken, so I don't worry about those things. Pork, it's very rare that I eat pork except bacon. I eat bacon fairly regularly. I don't avoid pork because I think it's less healthy or not as good. I just don't want it as much. Um, Occasionally, I'll see ribs on sale or something. I'll grab a rack like I did the other day. $7 for a 5 pound rack. Couldn't pass it up. I had to have it.
Pretty good.
I ate it. I didn't feel my best, but I mean, that's why I go back to beef 90, 85, 90% of the time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's so consistent in our community as well. I learned a long time ago that if I had, a more protein centric meal before something like a hockey game, like the night before a hockey game, I just would feel so flat. I need a steak and a bunch of eggs cooked in butter for the next day to feel like I'm optimal. I feel ready to go. It's such a different feeling. I think of the pork and the chicken and the ribs. Like, yeah, I would cook ribs every now and again from time to time too. And it's almost like a condiment if I don't eat the ribs also with a steak or the chuck roast or something else that's red meat. It's just, you're right. Like, you feel a little hungry. You're just not quite your best.
I have this when I go to the gym. I have these two sets of stairs that I have to run up every day to get to the main part of the gym, and I've noticed that on days that I eat beef and mostly beef, maybe some eggs, I can run up those steps and my legs will feel great. They don't burn. They feel good. I feel like I could run or climb 10 floors of steps, no problem. And there are other days when I go up those steps and I just feel worn out and my legs are heavy and the muscles, I feel that lactic acid kicking in, and I feel like that's because I didn't eat my best the day before, or I didn't have beef. Do you ever get that when you're playing hockey? Do you feel sluggish?
Dude, I was just going to say again, if I didn't get enough red meat, not only would I feel sluggish, I feel like I'm skating through slush, basically. Um, Not only that, but the recovery. I was just going to ask you the same thing. Like, have you had those workouts where you feel great, so you go probably a little too hard in the paint, and you really bury yourself in a workout and just think like, oh my goodness, like what have I done to myself? What am I going to do tomorrow? I'm going to be, completely wheelchair bound tomorrow, and you eat a good meal of mostly red meat, and the next morning you're just like, wow, I feel great. I recovered perfectly. Have you noticed that as well?
I have noticed that, and now that you say that, I'm putting together why I feel sore after my Monday workout. What today's Thursday, and I'm still sore, and I realize I haven't eaten a lot of beef the last 3 days. It's been chicken and pork, which is unusual for me. But today I'm having a good steak,
There we
and
go.
and I couldn't put it together. Why am I so sore? Yes, I pushed myself harder. I'm trying to do more sets now as opposed to just three. I'm trying to do 5 per session twice a week to see if that improves my strength. And I'm like, it's been 3 days. Why am I still sore? 4 days, actually.
Wow. Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. It's cool that you notice that. And again, it wouldn't be like overtly obvious, but yeah, looking back, it does make a lot of sense. Getting back to the cookbook, it also sounds like, and I'm just basing this based on the review that we read in the introduction, but it sounds like you're not just concerned with this is the recipe, just follow these steps. It's also seems to be very educational as far as like the processes go. You're teaching people about different concepts that they can apply to lots of different things. Am I understanding that correctly?
Uh, well, for sure. And a lot of my recipes that I post on X, I encourage people to play with the seasonings or the spices, or omit this ingredient or add that ingredient. That's how I've discovered a lot of recipes, because I see something that I like and then they put something in there and I'm like, no. And then so I go into my kitchen and I make it the way I think they should have made it in order for it to appeal to me. And I'm all for people doing that. A recipe is not the law. It's a guideline, and uh, it's most recipes are forgiving, except baking, when you're putting in finite amounts of baking powder and baking soda, and then it's important. But in most of the recipes I'm talking about, it's cool to freestyle, find out what you like. You might come up with something better than I did.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to think about it. And yeah, I had to buy a gram scale for my sourdough baking project back in the day when I was making my own bread. And you have to be very precise in temperatures and to the gram, different ingredients. And you're right, like a lot of these dishes that you were discussing and talking about, there is so much latitude, even in the cooking methods. And like if I sous vide something, 30 minutes or an hour too long, longer than I wanted, it doesn't make that big of a difference. Like they are very forgiving, tend to be very forgiving anyway. So that's a really good point. On the note of spices, what are some of your favorite kind of tips and tricks for people to understand that? I think people have, I don't know, maybe a little bit of intimidation when they look at the wall of spices at the grocery store and don't know what these things are, how to combine them, how to mix them. Like how do you help people demystify using spices to make their food taste better?
Well, everybody's tastes are different. It's taken me a long time, and I've been fortunate to have access to wide varieties of spices when I worked in restaurants, and I've tried lots of different things. But I think people can't go wrong with the basics like garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, um, salt, obviously, pepper. Some do, some don't. I don't do a lot of pepper. It makes me sneeze constantly for some reason. But yeah, those main three: garlic powder, onion powder, and paprika. Those are the main three. They're not, excuse me, they're not spices that are gonna overwhelm the dish unless you accidentally put too much in. But you can put little less of this or more of that to cater to your tastes.
I love that.
Those are my main ones.
I love that. Yeah, that's great advice. And like as you said, like a recipe is a guide. Most people also forget that as you're flavoring your foods, as you're adding spices or salt to your food, like taste it as you go. A lot of people don't even consider that you can try your own food and see if you like it. Start with a small amount. Did that make a difference? Add a little more. Did that make a difference? Like you can taste things as you go rather than just blindly following, some advice. So that's yeah, well
Right,
said.
and a lot of times when I make something, I'll add a little more of this, a little more of that, a little more of this, and next thing you know, I'm like, well, how much did I put in there? And I try to remember the next time. So this recipe book got me into the habit of being more conscious of amounts that I'm putting into things and writing it down. And people should probably do that too. Take notes on what you're doing so you can remember. Because one time I made the most amazing chili, and the next time it wasn't amazing, and I couldn't remember what the difference was
Oh,
somewhere in the spices.
dang. Oh, that's too bad. It's lost forever now. The most amazing chili.
Right.
Another thing that I've had a lot of success with is I do have those basic spices and I use them in different things from time to time. But also I've had a lot of success by using blends of different spices. So for example, I've got a Mexican food kind of blend. I have an Italian food kind of blend. I've got a pizza blend. I have one that is more Argentinian style. And I don't know exactly what the ratio of things in there is, but I know that I like Argentinian seasoning, and I know I really like Mexican food. And so, not only using blends of the types of cuisines that you like will get you pretty much there as far as the taste profile you're going for, but also if you're needing a little bit of variety, there's nothing that says you can't do ground beef, and rather than use the ground beef blend or a steak blend to season that up, you could try Italian season or Mexican seasoning, and it will just give you a different kind of a flavor that provides a little bit of value without spinning you in knots trying to figure out which spices you're going to use. You can always kind of rely on that.
Absolutely. Like those three basics that I said: garlic powder, onion powder, paprika. I can put a little chili powder and some cayenne, a little bit of cayenne, and I have a rub for ribs or roasts. I can add a little bit of cumin to that, and I've got a taco seasoning and oregano. And spices are great. It's like alchemy with for cooking.
Good call, man. You're making me hungry.
I've tried a lot of those different pre-made spices, and so many of them are hit or miss. I can always find something I like a little bit about it, but it ends up in my cabinet and it's three-quarters full 2 years later. Um, those are so hit or miss. That's why I started pretty much to try and make my own spices to find something that I like, and I've been pretty successful lately with those three basics.
That's cool. That's a really good point. I will say I have had less success buying the run of the mill kind of spice brands. I don't need to name them, but the ones that you always find at every grocery store
Right.
versus like if a restaurant has their own proprietary blend that they're selling, at small places or little barbecue joints. I tend to do a lot better with spices from there than I do from like whatever you're going to find at the general grocery store kind of a thing. The taste, the flavor is so much stronger, and a little bit of a good spice goes a very long way.
Right, and you got to be careful with ingredients if you're an ingredients nerd like I am, because you'll see that they put dextrose or MSG or maltodextrin. It, and some places like or not some places, some brands like McCormick, they're famous for putting silicone dioxide in their spices to make them freely or easily, and that's basically sand.
Gross.
The FDA says it's cool though. You can eat sand; it won't hurt.
Good.
But
Oh, good.
I'd
Yeah,
rather not.
I'd rather not. Wow. Okay. Talking about equipment, what do you find to be some of the most valuable pieces? And we could start with like maybe just the very bare bones basic. What do most of us need to prepare a majority of the foods? And then what would something be like a little bit more on like the kind of extravagant side that really makes decent food that you would say this is willing to invest some money into?
Okay, well, if you have nothing and you're moving into a brand new apartment, I encourage you to get a large skillet. I like carbon steel. It's affordable. It doesn't have all the chemicals sprayed on it that we have to worry about the forever chemicals and whatnot. And it's fairly non-stick. It's actually very good for being non-stick. Obviously, that get one a big one and a little one for eggs, one for your ground beef or steaks or whatever, and sheet pans, parchment paper for baking in the oven. You can cook bacon like on stuff like that. You can roast chicken. You can cook roasts if you're not going to cook them until they fall apart. I would get a crock pot or an instant pot if you want to get a pressure cooker. An instant pot is basically a crock pot on steroids. It's 5 times, 6 times faster. Um, they're 5 times, 6 times more expensive, but I mean, there's that. So if you can afford an instant pot, get one of those. If you can't get a crock pot, you can put a roast in there and slow cook it while you're at work and come home and you've got a delicious dinner. Those are the basics. A saucepan you may not need. I like it for heating up, or actually I do a small stock pot for making soups or broth. If you like those things, I like those sort of things during the winter, especially. A bit hot, a hot bowl of chicken broth when it's 10 degrees outside is amazing. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Those are the absolute basics. You can do a lot of things with just those things. And lastly, get a wooden utensils for cooking with, not the plastics. The plastic stuff is usually made with recycled electronics, and there's all kinds of possibly toxic elements in those. And when you're taking that plastic spatula and you're melting it on your skillet, you don't know how much of that's going to get into you when you eat it. So wood is safe.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good point. I don't think I'd really consider that very much. So I like that. I think that's a really good tip. And yes, like these things, it costs money. It can be an investment. You're talking about your Instant Pot is a little bit more expensive, but I'm thinking about mine, man. I bought mine probably 7 or 8 years ago. How many dollars has that thing saved? I use my Instant Pot to make 2 dozen, soft boiled eggs, perfect consistency the way I like them. I do that every 2 or 3 nights. We use that for all kinds of stuff, including making broth. And it's like that thing has paid itself over 100 times, 1,000 times with how much money we've saved eating at home, buying inexpensive ingredients. It takes a little bit longer, but these tools, with just a little bit of prep, just throwing a few things into an Instant Pot or a slow cooker, you pay for them, but they pay you back so quickly. I would just say like take a look at some of these things as far as an investment because they will save you so much money.
Interesting thing about the Instant Pot is I've read that they've shot themselves in the foot by making such a good product because people buy one and they own it for 8 or 10 years and they don't need another one. So Instant Pot loses out because if you buy one, you don't need one after that for the longest time. If they made garbage and it broke every 2 years, they would make a lot more money. So
Yeah, that's
that
a really good point.
your $100 is going to last you a lot longer if you put it into an Instant Pot.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. We use Instant Pot, not only the pot itself, but we also use their brand for the sous vide that we have. And same thing, like we use a sous vide every single day. We use it all the time. It just cooks everything just really easily. does it in the background. We can do other things. And so, yeah, some of these things will take a bit of an investment, but they do pay you back very, very quickly. Oh man. So what is next for you now that the cookbook is out? Are you thinking you're happy with the way it's going and you're just gonna, continue seeing how this cookbook does? Do you think you'll write a second one? What do you think is going to be next on the horizon for you?
Well, I keep logging my newer recipes. I haven't my interest and desire to keep creating new dishes has not waned. I have another dozen or 15 ideas down that work really well. So I guess I'm saving up ideas for the next cookbook.
Carnicopia too, my friend. You heard it here first.
Right.
That's going to be awesome. I'll make the ingredient. I'm sorry. I'll make the argument that one of the best things about a carnivore diet is that it is extremely simple. It is very inexpensive, and recipes get down to like basics. Recipes on carnivore is called scrambled eggs, and it's called burger patties, and it's called a New York strip. Like they're very, very simple. However, people can get bored with things, or they, need some creativity, and these types of cookbooks are incredible resources for people to just learn about different cuts, to explore different things, and to make this delicious and sustainable. It's so much more valuable than just like, oh, you're making the same recipes all the time. That's fine, that's great, but to put something out like you have that is easy, accessible, affordable, all that stuff, I think is a wonderful resource. And yeah, I'm sure the book will do very, very well. Yeah, thank you so very much for all the work you've done, and thank you for taking time to be on our show today. Where would you like people to go to find you, connect with you in your work, and also find the cookbook?
You can check me out on X at Cary Kelly 11. I'm also on YouTube. I don't post as frequently there. It's Carnicopia, Cary Kelly's Carnicopia there. If you're interested in that, it's pretty much what I post on X that gets posted on YouTube. Um, the book can be found on Amazon in most markets. Certain parts of the UK and Australia, it's not available for some reason. I don't get it, but um, that's where you can get it.
Excellent. Cool. We'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes. That's fantastic. Thank you again for your amazing work, and thank you for democratizing this. I'm certainly happy that you got angry enough to learn about this stuff to motivate you to want to go out and share. Like you said, I think it's a really natural reaction, and you're doing it in a way that's awesome. And anybody could, even if they don't get the cookbook, could follow you on Twitter, and you're putting stuff out there, which is really, really helpful for people. So again, Cary, thank you so very much for all of your hard work. Thank you for the cookbook, and thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks for having me. Everybody keep telling your story.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. It was an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.